Hey everyone, just quick announcement before I share today's episode with Erol Senel. And Erol has an amazing story. He's doing some incredible work, so I'm excited for him to get to share that with you guys. But I just want to take a minute to talk about the release of my first children's book of my Healthy Children's Book series called Maddox's Trip to the Chiropractor. It's a cute book with bright pictures that follows a toddler on her trip to the chiropractor. It shows her excitement and how she knows that it impacts her health in a positive way. And each purchase of the book will be supporting a project that I started called the Unlock Wellness Project. For each purchase of the book, we will be donating a wellness bag to a child in need. These wellness bags will include non-toxic, chemical-free essentials such as soap, shampoo, toothpaste, a toothbrush, items that a lot of the times children in tough situations don't have access to. You can learn more about the book and the Unlock Wellness Project by going to drkaseyjohnson.com. That's DRKASEY Johnson.com. Click on the shop tab, then click the children's book option. You'll be able to read a short description and even watch a short video with more information. You can also purchase the book directly on Amazon.com by searching Maddox's Trip to the Chiropractor. But I hope you guys loved the book. Be sure to check out my website to learn more, and thank you so much for the support. Now it's time for today's episode. I hope you love my conversation with Erol Senel. Welcome to the Unlock Wellness Podcast. I'm Dr. Casey and excited for today's guest. I'm here with Erol Senel. And Erol is the host of Digress Podcast. And he's been through a lot of obstacles to get where he is today. And I'm just excited for him to get to share his story of just discovering wellness and discovering awareness. And Erol, just thank you so much for taking time to come on. I'm excited to have you and excited for you to get to share your story.
Definitely excited to be here, Casey. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so I guess let's just jump into it and just if you just want to walk everybody through kind of your backstory and where you're from and just what led you on your own personal wellness journey and to where you are right now and the start of your podcast. So I guess let's just jump into the earlier days.
Yeah, sure. So I mean, as far as where I am and where I've been, where I currently sit is in New Hampshire. However, my story starts in Cleveland. Typical upbringing, kind of lower middle class. And I had some really great support through the years, but I also had a lot of areas that were kind of lacking. And those areas followed me for a long time. And you know what? They kind of still do follow me. I don't really talk about it too often. I think my wife pretty much bears the brunt of any of those conversations. But, I come from a home where, my mom, she really did try her best. And my dad was a hardworking dude, but, we didn't catch a lot of breaks. And my dad is a Turkish immigrant. Actually, he's back in Turkey now, so he's no longer an immigrant. Mm-hmm. However, he had that upbringing, which then translated to us a little bit more stern. And I want to say, not necessarily, it's not abusive. However, it's not traditional to maybe what we're accustomed to here in the States. So it's just, with a heavy hand, you do something wrong, you definitely hear about it, you feel it. While at the same time, you kind of understand, because when you go to visit Turkey and you kind of see the mentality, especially during the era that he grew up, it's very different than what we experience.
Just the norms are just completely opposite.
Yeah, it's so different. And unless you're from these different areas, you don't really get it. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It's just very different than what we're accustomed to. So I had a little bit of that growing up, which, for right or wrong, it helped me to become who I am. What eventually brought me out here to New Hampshire from Cleveland was just a little bit of a desire to get away from some of the drama and stuff that, any 18-year-old kind of wants to get away from when they're starting to find themselves. And that led me to St. Anselm College, which is a very small liberal arts school in southern New Hampshire. It was a great experience. I got to play football there. It really fostered my pursuit of continuous education and continuous development. So I'm very thankful that I had that experience. But at the same time, what I started to realize was really how emotionally immature maybe I was.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's the way to do it, or just maybe some of those developmental aspects were stunted. I didn't have really great coping skills. I didn't have those things really necessary that, quite honestly, I don't know if it was true or not, but I saw a lot of my friends just handle situations better than I did. And they had a more comprehensive view of, what they wanted to do. They had a better support system. I don't know if that's the reality or just my perception of the reality, but that kind of weighed on me a lot for quite a long time until eventually I got to develop my own skills. But during those kind of years where I was feeling it out, there was a real desire to try to be a better version of myself. But at the same time, I had no clue or anything to really base it off of. So there was just a ton of trial and error. And, when that happens, there's good decisions, bad decisions. And, as you make those bad decisions, it's trying to figure out, how do I cope with the fact that, I was a dick at some point. Am I allowed to say stuff like that?
Oh, yeah. No, you're good. You're good.
Okay. That I was a dick to this person, or, that relationship wasn't the healthiest. And you know what? It was my immaturity that led to that. And all that stuff kind of compounds on you over the years. And that really began to bother me. And I think because of that, I carried depression for quite a long time. And, I still do. However, I think I've really learned how to cope with it a lot better than I did in the past, and especially through the help of some really great counselors that I've sought out through the years and tried to learn from, and my own desire to kind of understand psychology better, and what makes people tick, and what are some of those things that are going on in the background that are causing me to feel the way that I do.
Mm-hmm.
And because of all that, I really think that I was able to, my place of maturity now is further along than it would have been if I had those coping mechanisms earlier, because
Right.
I think I had a smarter development. But at the same time, I think I've made a lot of immature mistakes along the way that could have been avoided if I had those coping mechanisms sooner rather than later.
Right. But at the same time, I mean, whenever you make a mistake, or I guess, nothing's ever really a failure, right? So I guess it kind of brings you out stronger on the other side. Or like if you compared yourself to somebody who had zero struggles, it kind of evens the playing field out when you kind of think about like, you had to build the maturity and the coping mechanisms on your own. And I mean, you're just stronger for that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think I'm better for it. And I think I have a better appreciation for the fact that I have overcome some of that stuff than I ever could have if I hadn't gone through it. And I think that, it's a testament to wanting to become better. That element of self-love is really, it's not just, patting yourself on the back, but it's really being critical where in the areas where you're a fuck up and realizing that you got to do something to better those areas. Otherwise, you're just going to go on being a dink. And I didn't want to go down that path. So luckily, I've had some really great people. My wife is definitely one of them who, again, she's been with me for so long that she's bared the brunt of me not being the best person at times, but always wanting to be the better person is what I think gave her hope.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why, she stuck out things with me, because she's amazing. She hasn't had a lot of the stresses that I've had. So it's made it harder for her to understand some of it along the way, but she's been open-minded to it. So, this is my opportunity to say thank you to her for that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So how does that lead to wanting to do a podcast about people who get shit done? During that journey, part of it is kind of just being the willingness of being uncomfortable and being self-critical. And one of the things that I really fought against was this really deep sense of introverted behavior, I guess is the way to put it, where, you kind of shut down in certain social situations. You just kind of sit in the corner and you're that guy holding the beer can, standing against the wall type of thing. But really challenging myself. And when there was a period where I went to New York to work in my big boy job. And there was a period where I was there for myself for about 10 months. And it really forced me out of my comfort zone to establish relationships with, people that I'm just not familiar with, not being that guy leaning against the wall, but being the guy who's, approaching people, talking, networking. And, I think that's where that critical behavior comes in, where you really want to, it's either I can be that miserable SOB, or I can take this as an opportunity to really progress myself. And from that, I networked and I really developed this really great, interesting collection of people along the way. Because besides what I do for work, I was big into the wine scene. So I got to know all these neat people. I got to work for Gary Vaynerchuk for a short period of time. That was
That's
cool.
awesome.
And I met some cool people that way. And eventually, when I came up against another mental roadblock, which I'll talk about in just a second, I realized I got this phenomenal network and people should know about the people in the network. And that's how the podcast was part of why the podcast was born.
That's cool. No, and I mean, yeah, I mean, it's all about pushing yourself past that comfort zone, because nothing ever good happens in that comfort zone. And yeah, and everything is all about networking and meeting people, because that's what life's all about, right? Is connecting with people and helping each other. And no, that's awesome. You got to work for Gary Vee for a while. I didn't know that. That's amazing. How big of an impact did being in that environment help you with wanting to push yourself past your comfort zone? Because I mean, I follow Gary Vaynerchuk's content like crazy, and I just can't imagine what that environment must have been like, just to help push the needle forward, like, for you.
Yeah. So what it did, so this was back in his wine library days.
Okay.
Before he was the Gary Vee that everyone knows.
Right.
And I was really just writing for one of his blogs. He had a community of wine writers that he had creating content for him, pretty much to just, get more people engaged in the social. This is back when, you're still trying to figure out what's the right social platform. Mm-hmm. Is it a blog? Is it it was almost like a Reddit thread. There's like a bunch of people just kind of creating content for him. And through that, you're getting engaged with these, really jazzy, young, up and coming people that eventually, once Instagram blows up, once Twitter gets going, they have a very big presence on there. So it was neat to be around those people and kind of get to know them remotely. And also obviously through all the wine events that were going on in New York City while I was there, it was neat to get to see these people, meet them. And the doors that opened while I was there alone was huge. Just because all of a sudden I had this community. I didn't necessarily know them. Mm-hmm. It was all digital, which to my introverted core, it was very appealing, Right. But it also gave me that opportunity to really step out and have that human interaction and start to get comfortable with that, which I think was just vital, because I was almost in a period of fight or flight. Mm-hmm. Just because it was a rough period, like, I'm not going to get too much into that. However, being there alone, away from the people that you need, is like, okay, I just got to rely on myself. There's no crutch for me. So I just did it. And so it was huge. So what Gary's platform and his energy, because I'm obviously anyone who follows him, it's kind of addictive.
Yeah, right.
For the good or bad, I think. Yeah. That might be a whole nother topic, but it's like, you really have to have a filter with how much you want to integrate Gary's personality and drive into your own, because he has the right support system to do what he does. Not everyone does. And it can cause issues, which is inevitable. Like anything, it's finding that right balance, but I say it's a lot. I just realized that. So whoever's keeping count as they're listening, probably up to 37.
No, you're good.
But it really comes down to finding that balance. And that's what New York represented to me, was finally starting to get comfortable with being out there, putting myself out there, allowing myself to look like a fool or to fail with trying to engage people. There's always that constant fear that you're never going to be accepted. And I think that's why people are introverted to begin with. But I was able to get past that. And the New York experience, for as unpleasant as it was vital for me.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, so you had that job, you're in New York. So how did that kind of progress from there? I know you said that because of all of the networking, that led you to want to share these people's stories even more. So that kind of took you to the podcast, right? That's kind of how it progressed?
Yeah. So the podcast, just tell you how the podcast was born. So my big boy job is I work for a really big financial firm. I do product execution, internal marketing type stuff. And there's a period where it's just like, you can't get out of your own way. You're just miserable at what you do. You've been doing it for a little bit too long, where you kind of go through a slump and you start to explore, okay, what's on the outside? But the one thing I realized is I've been working at this firm for probably 13 years now. Mm-hmm. And I don't have any external resume, or not resume, but portfolio that I can turn into a marketing job outside.
Right.
So what I wanted to do was start to rebrand myself. So what better way than to actually create and promote content? So I was just kind of brainstorming. Okay, go back to the blog thing. I've done a couple of wine blogs that were pretty big for a while, but I'm like, you know what? Everyone has a blog now. I kind of want to get away from that. Mm-hmm. How can I better tell my story? And that's where the podcast idea came in, because I do podcasts for work, which are received very well. So I'm like, oh, well, why don't I actually do podcasts about stuff I like for once, you know? And that's where I tried to figure out, okay, I'm going to do a podcast. What's it going to be about? Is it going to be about history? Because I went to school for history, a history buff. I love it. Is it going to be about business? Is it what's the best place? And I kind of went back to the wine mentality, because the first person I wanted to interview, his name's Michael Wynn. He's a director of marketing for Red Cap Vineyards, was to go down that and start to think about, okay, who else besides him do I have in my network that would be really appealing? And I started to look at that. I'm like, man, there's some really cool people here. So, and then they continuously start to evolve, you know, because as you start this, the people that you interview, one of the things I ask them is, who would you want to hear from? Mm-hmm. And then I'll take that and I'll reach out to them. So it's a neat way to build the network. It's a neat way to create and meet and create some really good content, meet good people. And that's how it was born. Now, as you know, I almost walked away from it like a week ago because there's a lot of shit going on in my life, as far as, you know, moving and trying to prioritize. And I have some athletic goals that I still want to achieve. But the one thing, you know, I didn't do well in that situation was trying to take a step back and just analyze, you know, what's going on and what's essential, what's not. Mm-hmm. So I had like that overreaction to just simplify completely, you know, kind of cut out everything and then just focus on one thing. But then once you do that, you start to regret cutting out some of the things. So I did come back to continuing the podcast because I do love it. Yeah, it's a great medium. And I've learned so much from some of the guests that I've had already. Up as of right now, I don't know when this is going to air, but as of right now, I only have 7 episodes. But I've learned so much from almost all of them that it's been great. And I know we're going to talk about that in a minute.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I mean, yeah, you definitely learn a lot from your guests, and it's just definitely inspiring to hear other people's stories. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, what do you think your biggest takeaways have been so far from the different guests that you've had?
Yeah, so I'd say if I could sum it all up into just one word, it's perspective. Mm-hmm. You know, like we're all raised in a very specific way by people who have specific views, be it about the world, be it about what it means to be a man, about the way you should react to something that happens in your life. So the psychological component, the physical component, you know, the maturity, religion, whatever it might be, we're raised with that kind of just as our backbone. And we lean on that so heavily as we go through our day to day. And we make quite honestly, we all make some really bad decisions mm-hmm. based off of it. You know, we have biases that creep in and we're closed-minded, or we hear something and our knee-jerk reaction is to fall back on this backbone of, you know, who we, quote unquote, who we are or what we stand for. But we very rarely take time to step back and analyze that. And I think that's what I've gotten most out of these interviews, is that to be self-critical about what my foundation is, because my foundation, as I said earlier, when I was describing the way I was brought up, is actually based off of something that's somewhat broken. Mm-hmm. So why am I still relying on that?
That's very true. Yeah, no, I mean, and that's very well said. And I love that that's your takeaway. I mean, because like based on like, you know, a lot of the guests that I have on my podcast, like, you know, a lot of my guests, we're talking about, the physical health and nutrition and things like that. And even spiritual health. And it's just, it goes along with that perfectly because it's, you get that backbone from the way you were raised, the way, depending on where you're born or the family that you have, like all of that comes into play. Like if your family doesn't work out and not very healthy and they eat poorly, for the most part, it kind of just keeps on rolling unless you have somebody that looks into other options. And so that the way you worded that was perfect. Yeah, and like I know you were talking about that you are starting to train a little bit more, and you're getting back into the cycling. So you kind of want to talk about how that's played a positive role in your life, and how like changing your health physically has impacted maybe some of the things that were going on in your life and just improved upon the things that you were going through.
Yeah, so it kind of stems to what we were just talking about. So some of the things that I learned, especially there's one guest in particular, and I believe that you listened to that one, was Tina Hurley.
Mm-hmm.
She's an amputee. She's had a really rough path. Recent amputee, amazing, beautiful woman, great athlete, has everything going for her on the surface, but then she develops this really terrible, or not develops, but she's had this ailment that eventually led to her having part of her leg amputated. And, for a lot of people, it would just be crushing. You go from being like this picture perfect person to the world's falling apart. And then on top of that, there's a divorce that she goes through. And it's like, oh my God. But the perspective that she showed, and I didn't really know her all that well prior to interviewing her, but the perspective that she shared during the interview really hit home with me. So that was the one that kind of got me starting to think of, okay, I need to start to look at things differently, because for the first time, I'm seeing something that there's a need for more purpose. So that kind of had me start to self-evaluate. And then another guest starts talking about, he's a movie producer. He made a documentary about heroin addiction, which is phenomenal. And once it's out, I can't wait for you to see it, because I've never been so moved by anything I've ever seen in my
life. Yeah, it sounds awesome. I'm excited to see it too.
Yeah, but that one also brought me a step further. Okay, control what you control. Change your perspective. Mm-hmm. Look at things differently. Be thankful for what you have. Be self-critical. And that led to me starting to think of, okay, I have a great job. I don't need to find a new job. What are the things that really, truly make me happy? Getting a new job is not going to give me that happiness. So, okay, I got to turn internally. What am I doing internally that isn't healthy? All right, I'm drinking too much. I'm not being active enough. So those things tie directly into the mental health component. I'm
right.
Self-medicating, blah, blah, blah. So, I try to, and for someone who's so deep into wine, it's really hard to pull back, let me tell you. So definitely not the industry to be in if you are a depressed person, by the way.
Yeah, no, it's not. Yeah, that doesn't sound like a good mixture.
No, it's really not. But so I pulled back on that. Now I still, I went for a month, didn't drink, felt great. Trying to slowly integrate it back in a healthy way, because to deny it completely is just going to cause an issue further down the road. I want to have a healthy relationship with that there. I want to be healthier physically. I put on weight the past year. I went from being a marathoner to putting on 30 pounds, and it's not a great feeling. So it's like, I got to get this shit back in line. And that's where the whole cycling came from. So long, very, very long story short, or however, very, very long story long. I'm at the point where it's like, I have these goals back again, which is good. It's been a while since I've had a physical goal that is attainable. We all have unattainable goals, but this one's attainable. So my goal is to, by 2019, complete an Ironman, a full Ironman. So that means next year I want to do 2 halves. All right. So what do I have to do to get there? So the first thing is, focus on the healthy things, get rid of the unhealthy things. And, I kind of sworn to myself, trying to really wean hard alcohol out of my life completely. Like, it doesn't do anything for you. It only takes away from you. If we're truly being critical of ourselves, there's no benefit to hard alcohol. Have a healthy relationship with wine. Don't overdo it. 1 glass, 2 max, so my wife and I, we can split the bottle, and that's that. And then have a healthier approach to eating. We had the opportunity just through networking to come across one of my wife's acquaintances, I want to say, an Instagram acquaintance who does meal prep. So I'm integrating that into it, and just trying to make some smarter decisions. All of which it sounds like common sense, but it's a lot harder to implement when you just have this huge track record of not self-abusive behavior, but just unhealthy behavior when it comes to eating and drinking.
Yeah. And, it's a role. Everybody, it's crazy because it's like everybody knows what to do, but it's the action part that is the hard thing. I mean, everybody knows like what the healthy foods are. Everybody knows like we need to move our bodies or, drink less or have a positive mental state. Like everybody knows these things, but it's the implementation that is the hard thing. Like it's definitely easier said than done. But I love how you're doing it because it's all about setting the goal. If it's just like I just want to be healthier, like that's not specific enough. So I love how you've set those goals for yourself, because it just, like you were saying, it makes it more attainable and it makes it actually doable.
Yeah. So that's the hope. Within the next 2 years, do a full Ironman, and
that's awesome. Do you know where you're gonna do the 2 halves and then the whole? You got it planned out?
I have some of it planned out. The one of the halves is going to be in Maine, just from proximity. It's
cool.
An hour away, so I like that. The other one I'd like to do would be the Nashville, but we'll see. I mean, it all depends on how my body holds up.
Right.
Because unfortunately, I am battling a torn ACL. Tore it in January. I don't want to have surgery.
You definitely take it easy. Maybe start with the swimming training so that one heals.
Yeah. Well, it's felt fine with the riding and getting back into running. But then again, I haven't run any halves or full marathons since I've done it. So we'll see what happens. Either way, I'm going to stay active. That's the primary goal, is to be healthy. So even if something happens with the knee, it's not having that reaction where you shut down and you get that woe is me mentality. It's really, okay, so I just need to reevaluate, figure out what's realistic, and stick with it.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. You said you've done a marathon before. Have you done like any triathlons or like anything like that before? Or
so I've always wanted to do it. Yeah, I've always wanted to do a try. I was a cyclist before we had my son. So 8 years ago, we used to, like, that's how my wife and I met, was really around cycling. Once we had him, the time kind of went away. So we sold our bikes and got into other stuff, but we kind of got back into that. And I always wanted to do a triathlon, but I've never been at the point where I had the bike and wanted to do it.
Right.
So now got the bike back. I've got the running experience I've done 4 marathons, a whole bunch of half marathons, believe it or not, even though in my pictures on Instagram, I'm looking pretty thick right now. I was a lean, mean running machine. So I'm looking forward to getting back to that.
And then awesome.
Putting those 2. And then I've always been a strong swimmer. Growing up, I swam very early in life, did swim teams, stuff like that. So I'm looking forward to putting it all together, reaching a couple goals. So
yeah, no, that's cool. And I'm excited to, follow along and see how the training goes and how the actual races go too. It'll be fun to watch on my end. I know you'll be killing yourself through the training, but I'll be watching. I'll be cheering you on.
Training's the fun part,
Right.
It's dealing with the mental shortfall of not living up to your expectations, and you actually compete. That's the hard part.
Gotcha. Yep.
Have you run any marathons or anything like that?
I've done a half marathon, a lot of 5Ks, and I'm signed up to do a triathlon in April. So
awesome.
Yeah, so I'm sure I'll know all about that soon enough. So
yeah.
I'm excited though.
Yeah, it's funny. So the one thing you want to do is just enjoy the experience. I think that the training is probably the funnest part of all of it, because anything can go wrong on race day. One of the things that is the hardest thing to do, especially when you're like marathoning, is the whole nutritional component. So you could be in like peak tip top shape. All your runs are great leading up to it. Everything's doing great. And then, you just eat the wrong thing. That means you have to stop for the bathroom. You stop for even a minute. Even a minute, your muscles start to seize up. And it's so hard if you're going at a good pace to loosen up in any kind of time, and then you
jump
start
back in. Yeah.
There's so many things that go wrong on race day. So for anyone who's out there listening, really try to figure out if you're a strong runner, a strong cyclist, whatever it is, and I don't have to tell you, or if you're aspiring to be, it's really trying to focus on that nutritional component. Figure out what that balance is, because you can be the best that you've ever been, but if your gut isn't happy with you, oh well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's an awesome point.
Didn't expect to talk about the gut today. So.
Hey, you never know where the conversation goes, right?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. So, Erol, like, I know we talked about the podcast is going to continue, and yet the race is coming up. Is there anything happening else in the future that you want to share with people, or just continue just to put out great content, or just anything you want to share at all?
Yeah. So, I mean, the future is really about starting to find some contentment with life. I've been a very driven and unsettled person for such a long time that I need to teach myself how to slow down a little bit and really savor those things that I prioritize as very important. One of the things that, my wife would always say is that you never just appreciate the moment. Like what I was just talking about as far as like the racing, you train so hard, you want to do this, and then you complete the marathon, but you're pissed at your time. Or, you get a great job, but you want to move. I've always been a very unsettled, chaotic person, and that's all my own doing. So I'm looking forward for the near future to just be a nice period of, creating good content with the podcast, appreciating the fact that I have some really great people that want to talk to me, doing the training for the triathlon, getting into good shape, and savoring the opportunity that my family has with me to have a good job, that we can do all these things as a family and still be financially just well to do. Like being grateful, I think, is really the thing that I look forward to. Is long and short of it, right? It all comes back to being grateful. Right. And I haven't done a great job of that in life, and it's something I look forward to being better at.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And Erol, what is the best way for people to follow you on social media? That way they can keep up with all of your new podcasts and just everything that you're doing and your training and just everything that you're up to.
Yeah, so I'm decided to consolidate it all onto the Instagram account. So if you go to I Digress Podcast on Instagram, that'll be the one-stop shop. I have the link in there for iTunes so that you guys can listen. I'm going to start posting some stuff about my training as it actually gets interesting.
Right.
I don't want to just post stuff to post it. But what you'll primarily find there right now is just a lot of information about the topics that I've talked about in the past, the guests that we've had in the past. I try to let the guests live on so that I'm not just posting them for their one episode. I like to go back, let people know what's going on with them. So that would be the place to go. So at I Digress Podcast on Instagram.
Perfect. And then Erol, just a closing question that I ask every guest. But if you just had one piece of advice for the audience, maybe it was your biggest takeaway so far through this whole journey, this whole process. But if you just had one piece of advice to give, what would it be?
Be honestly critical of yourself. Think about who you are and what you want to be. And if you're doing stuff that's counter to that, be big enough to recognize that and to try to fix it.
Awesome. No, I love it. That's perfect, Erol. And just thank you so much for taking time to come on. I loved having you, and just excited to see how everything plays out, how the training plays out, and just future podcasts.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Casey. This was a lot of fun. I was a little nervous, but this was fun.
You did great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in to today's episode. I hope you loved my conversation with Erol. He's doing such positive work, and I'm excited for you guys to follow him on social media to keep up with everything that he's doing. You can find the social media link that we talked about in the episode in the show notes, but you can also find them on my website as well at drcaseyjohnson.com. That's DRKASEY Johnson.com. Click on the Listen tab. Then from there, you'll be able to see all of the past guests that have come on the Unlock Wellness podcast, read a little bit about each guest, and be able to click on their social media links, website, all of that. So all of Erol's information can be found on my site as well. If you guys loved today's episode with Erol, be sure to jump onto iTunes, subscribe, and write a review. It really helps me out a lot, and I really appreciate all of the feedback and support. And like I spoke about in the intro, also be sure to check out my first children's book of my Healthy Children's Book series called Maddox's Trip to the Chiropractor. Each purchase of the book supports the Unlock Wellness Project, which applies a wellness bag to a child in need for each book purchased. You can learn more about the book and the Unlock Wellness Project on my website as well at drcaseyjohnson.com. Click on the Shop tab, then choose the Children's Book option. You'll be able to read a short description and even watch a short video to learn more. If you do purchase the book, be sure to share it on social media using the hashtag UWProject. I'll repost it and give you a shout out on the podcast. But I hope you guys loved the book. Thank you so much for the support, and I hope you loved today's episode. Thank you guys so much for tuning in.